Thank you very much. First of all, let me say that I really appreciate the invitation. It is indeed the third time we are meeting in this format, but I'm always very pleased to meet you in our 28 capitals around Europe, and anytime we have the opportunity to do so. Indeed, for me, it is very relevant that we have this chance to discuss the implementation part of the global strategy that is related to defense and security. As you know, I presented ideas on the implementation of the global strategy on all fields, well, not all fields, but first set of priorities stemming from the global strategy. So not only related to security and defense, but also to other areas, and namely our work towards building resilience and the integrated approach to all phases of conflicts and crisis, but also public diplomacy and the internal-external nexus of our work. But as you also know very well, most of the attention, both at the public opinion level and also the political level, is focused on the implementation plan on security and defense. And I believe this meeting today is extremely timely, also because exactly in 1 week from now, Monday next week, I will be discussing and deciding on the implementation plan with foreign and defense ministers during a joint session of the Foreign Affairs Council, both in the formation of foreign ministers and defense ministers. So this exchange today gives us all, I think, a good opportunity to look more in depth and prepare also that meeting somehow, because this goes without saying, especially in the field of implementation on defense and security, the ownership is the ownership of the member states. So it is extremely important that we do this exercise step by step all together. I will start by saying two things, and then I'll try to go a little bit more into the substance. One is that the work on the implementation plan on security and defense will be part of a package in two senses, in two ways. In one way, as I mentioned, it will be part of the entire work on implementation of the global strategy, so also linked to elements that are not related to security and defense. But also it will be part of a larger security and defense package, because it will be closely linked to the work on the follow-up to the joint EU-NATO declaration we signed in Warsaw. And in this respect, our work with NATO, both at staff level and at my level, has been very intense in the last months. And I was participating to the defense ministers meeting some 10 days ago here in Brussels, exactly on this. So we plan, together with Secretary General Stoltenberg, to present a common set of proposals for an implementation of that joint declaration as something that is linked to this internal work we're doing in the European Union, to stress the complementarity and the need to go hand in hand in this respect. But also, the third element of this package on European defense and security is the European Defense Action Plan that the Commission will adopt later this month, so that we have the three elements hopefully coherent, complementary to each other, and representing each of them one element of what I believe can be really a strengthening of our security and defense policies and instruments. I know that we have, especially around this table, we've referred to the need to strengthen and to make our security and defense work more credible and stronger. What is different today than in the past? I believe we have two elements that are substantially very different. First of all, the awareness that the security situation inside and outside of the European Union is not allowing us to be vague or general or simply indicate good intentions. If you look at the opinion polls, which I don't know It's not necessarily your task to do, but this is what the decision-making level of all our member states and European institutions is very much looking at. If you look at European opinion polls everywhere, in every single member state, security is named as #1 issue for the European citizens. I am personally not so much convinced that this has dramatically changed over the last year. Probably the security situation was already serious before, but there is a new awareness in our public opinion, and there is a new awareness in our political leadership. That first we have to do more on security and defense, that what we do on security and defense externally has an impact on our security and defense internally, that the security of any of our member states has an impact on all our citizens, and we see it very clearly. Whenever something happens in one of our countries, victims are very difficult to be identified only with one nationality, because our people are in the European Union. And the security of one of us affect directly the security of all others. So it is, I think, more evident today, and this is the second element I think is new today rather than before. This is maybe the field where it is self-evident that to do better, we have to do together. And I think that this awareness is more evident today than it used to be in the past years. So I believe we have a window of opportunity today to finally move to a different level of our security and defense without having big strategic reflections, also because I believe that part of them were already carried out during the global strategy exercise and in the years before, because we're not inventing much. I mean, you have been working on most of the things we will be discussing with the ministers in the years that are behind us. But I believe that today we have a window of opportunity, not only with the defense ministers, but also with the heads of state and government that, not by chance, I believe, have indicated their will to decide on an implementation plan on security and defense during the European Council in December. So on Monday next week, we will be discussing with the foreign and defense ministers together an implementation plan that, in my view, but then this will be the result also common work we will do with the ministers, should define a new level of ambition that should outline the goals that the European Union and the member states would like to achieve, including through the CSDP, in order to implement the global strategy in the fields of security and defense. And we propose 3 elements to this new level of ambition. The first one, responding to external conflicts and crises. If you look at the world, the area of instability and conflicts is all around the European Union. So we're living at the center of one of the most dangerous places in the world. So this requires us to focus on the capacity to react and respond to crises around us. Second, building the capacities of fragile partners, again, mainly around us, but the concept of neighborhood here can go further beyond the traditional geographic neighborhood, because I believe Africa is, for instance, a key investment for us in terms of building capacities of partners. 3, protecting the Union and the citizens of the Union. Here I would like to immediately clarify, when we talk about protecting the Union and its citizens, we do not think of collective defense. We do not think of tasks that are, for those member states that are members of NATO, a core responsibility of the alliance or of national competencies. But my suggestion is that we focus on the ways in which, as European Union, we can, through our external action, contribute to the protection of the Union and the citizens, including the work we are doing also with NATO on cybersecurity, on hybrid threats, but also the protection of the Union, I believe, is something that we achieve also when we work on maritime security or the common goods, protection of common goods. So these three elements are what we suggest as the three building blocks of a new level of ambition. As I said, clarifying what this exercise is not aimed at. I've already said it's not aimed at equipping ourselves for collective defense. It's not aimed at duplicating or overlapping with what other partners are already doing, being it NATO, or on another side, United Nations, which is a relevant partner for us in the field of peace and security. And especially when we look at developing capabilities, and I'll come to that in a moment, it is very clear, and I believe I made it very clear with our friends and colleagues in NATO, it is about supporting member states in their development of a single set of forces that then can be used inside the European Union or for EU missions and operations, but it also can be used within the UN framework or NATO framework or on a national level or alliances of different kinds. Together with the level of ambition, we identify also, we propose also some elements, some concrete actions that are necessary to implement the level of ambition in a credible way. To do this, we need, first of all, to identify the related capability development priorities. Second, deepen defense cooperation and deliver the required capabilities together. 3, adjust the EU structures for situational awareness, planning, and conduct of missions and operations, as well as the rapid response toolbox. 4, increase financial solidarity and flexibility and ensure a seamless range of funding options as part of an integrated approach. We know very well this is sometimes the obstacle we face when we look at concrete steps to set up missions and operations. And finally, but not at all coming last, actively building or taking forward CSDP partnerships. This is actually the whole philosophy of the global strategy, building strong partnerships that allow us to work more efficiently in the world. Deepening defense cooperation is crucial as we see it, and as I said, this is also the result of a work we've done in the last 2-3 months, but I would say also in the last years with member states. Deepening defense cooperation is in particular crucial for member states in this moment, not only because security requirements go up, but also because we come out of 8 years of a financial crisis in Europe, and not only in Europe, and the economies of scale that are needed, especially when you look at advanced defense technology and the need to retain a full spectrum armed forces, is something we can do more efficiently if we do it together. So we will look in particular to this. At the same time, we know very well that, as I said, decisions and ownership in this sector, more than in any other sector, lies in the hands of member states. This means decisions on member state side to do more, to do better, to do more together, to invest more in our common future. Here, the role of the European Defence Agency in assisting member states to develop the required capabilities is key, and I'm glad that we're working very much together in this respect. There are some elements that ministers, but also prime ministers, presidents and chancellors, heads of state and government in general, have signaled as elements that could be interesting to explore. So elements that could be identified not as something on which we decide already next week or in a month from now, but we can explore more for the future. As elements that could be, that are already present in our treaties as possibilities, but maybe need a little bit more of reflection and options to be studied and prepared. This is the case for sure for PESCO, but more on the horizon, and because it's one of the elements where we would be testing something completely new. So a little bit of options and possibilities would be required. It could be there could be also reflection on a coordinated annual review on defense to enable us to deliver together the required capabilities for the level of ambition. There could be an option to address together shortcomings in our structures for planning and conduct of military and civilian CSDP missions and operations. Here again, I would like to stress this is not about establishing new big structures. It's not a shape kind of headquarters we're looking at or even thinking of. But I've heard from many member states, actually most of, if not all of, the need to streamline more what we have. Anytime that I'm asked, are you thinking of establishing a headquarter, I point out to the fact that we already have 5 headquarters. It's a matter of making our existing structures work better and in a more rational way. And here I think your expertise and your advices could be extremely helpful, I think, also from an operational point of view, how to make what we have work better, improve civilian and military synergies, improve the continuity between planning and conduct of missions and operations. Again, something that might be definitely less sexy from a communicating point of view than the European Army, which, as you have clearly understood, is not on the table, but something that we require to work in an efficient and effective way. The other thing that I believe would be useful to study and to put on the table is a reflection on the rapid response tools we have, starting from the always discussed but never used issue of the battle groups. So going deep from a very pragmatic but also ambitious point of view on what we have and why things we have do not work at the maximum speed we can need, provided we need it, always following a political indication. So this all requires also an increased financial solidarity, more flexibility in our financial tools, and this is why we would be suggesting to the ministers to look also at the possibility of having a range of funding options for our missions and operations, and in general terms for our CSDP. Because, as I said before, the financial coverage of already existing CSDP, but even more if we look at a different level of ambition, we will need to look seriously to that. So I'll stop here also because I'm very much interested in hearing your views. As always, not only questions, but I'm also very much interested in hearing comments and suggestions. As I said, the idea is to have a very pragmatic approach, but also an ambitious approach. This time I turned the common European Union practice upside down. Normally we go slowly, step by step, on the consolidated consensus. This time I thought it was good for me to present all possible range of options and then ask the member states how far they want to go. So that we do not prevent any kind of thinking or decision, but we move together. And I stress here together. I forgot to mention one thing. For me, it's natural, but I understand it's always better to stress this, as well as I always stress the fact that this exercise is also to strengthen our partnership with NATO, but also with the United Nations, because a stronger European Union in security and defense will also make our cooperation with NATO or with the United Nations stronger. Another thing that I didn't spell out explicitly, but this is more than obvious for me, this is an exercise we do at 28 and still at 28. So all the narrative of we strengthen now the EU security and defense cooperation, it's because of the results of the UK referendum, not at all. For me, this is a result of the increased need to have security and defense deliverables to our citizens. And the more we manage to do together at 28, the happier I believe all of us will be, and the more effective our work will be. So, very pragmatic approach, also very ambitious, trying to move together with, as I said, clear goals, clear actions, with no time for big theoretical debates or philosophical debates. But I hope that out of this process we will come with a very tight timeline, with really some game-changing decisions in practical terms, and make our common work function better. And as I said, in terms of process, next week, well, we started this work over the summer. We had first orientation debates with foreign ministers, with defense ministers, most of all. Heads of state and government had some exchanges already in this respect, both in Bratislava in an informal summit at 27, but also in the European Council, started to reflect a bit on this. Next week, and then obviously a constant work through PSC. Next week, Foreign Affairs Council, foreign ministers and defense ministers together, European Council in December, and then obviously from that moment onwards, our work on implementing step by step all the single elements on which we will decide will be our daily work, on which I'm really very much looking forward to work together in a strongly associated manner.